Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stober. Now, following the acceptance of the recommendations of the Justice Akinola Aguda panel that Nigeria's federal capital be moved out of Lagos, the then military government of General Murtala Muhammad promulgated Decree Number 6 of 1976, now the Federal Capital Territory Act, and subsequently established the Federal Capital Development Authority, FCDA. Now, its responsibility was to plan, design, and develop the new federal capital to the standard of new capital cities around the world. Now, Nigeria's capital city, Abuja, has since grown and is still growing in massive infrastructure and population. Well, this growth has not been without the expected and unforeseen challenges associated with fast developing urban centers, not the least overstretching of social amenities and distortions to the original plan. Of course, there is also the explosion of the population. Now, the law setting up the FCDA provides for the appointment of an executive secretary who will be the Chief Executive Officer of the authority. Today, I sit with the incumbent, Shehu Hadi Ahmad, an engineer who was at various times a lecturer at the Kaduna Polytechnic, Commissioner for Works and Infrastructure in Gombe State, and Director Engineering Services at the FCDA. He is a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and also a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Builders. Well, of course, he's a registered engineer with the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN. Let's welcome Engineer Shehu Hadi Ahmad, Executive Secretary of the Federal Capital Development Authority, FCD. Thanks for being with us on One-on-One.
Thank you very much. Hello, viewers, and glad to be on this program. Thank you.
Right. Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. Well, we all know the story behind the FCT, movement from Lagos to Abuja. But then, the city has grown in leaps and bounds. But it's still a little bit, a long way from what was envisaged and how it was projected to turn out. Let's start from seeing what Abuja was meant to be and its current state today.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Well, as has been captured in the opening narrative, truly Abuja is supposedly the only city for now in Nigeria that is being developed on the basis of an approved master plan. Way back in 1976, following the proclamation that there should be a new capital city and the enactment of the laws as has now come to be. In 1979 then, the FCDA having been established, Federal Capital Development Authority, engaged the services of Mrs. International Planning Associates to prepare the master plan for the city and the territory. The master plan is supposed to be the guiding document for the development, and it enshrines how the operation of facilities, networking of engineering infrastructure, as well as provision of other social amenities, schools, hospitals, and what have you, that will allow for the functioning of the city, what to operate. Upon the receipt of that document, the FCDA then just swung into action and begin the implementation. It was a document that foresaw the development of the capital city itself in stages, sequential development. This will be based on the growth of the city, as well as, of course, now, which has come to term, availability of funds. Growth of the city was envisaged to be in stages of getting to the target population of 3.1 million, as has been planned by the Abuja Master Plan. As we speak, you know, that is another story when we get to that. The city was, as produced from the document, was planned to have about 3 phases with provision for expansion into additional, the 4th phase of north and south. That is phase 4 north and phase 4 south. But ideally, what was targeted was phases 1, 2, and 3. Then they made a provision should the need arise, and the need actually eventually arose to have phase 4 north and south. So it became like a crescent with 1, 2, 3 phases within the city emblem, and then at the edges you have the phases 4 north and phases 4 south. And incidentally, this defined, being in the shape of a crescent, it defined the city into 2 development corridors, the northern development corridor and the southern development corridor, meeting within the central area. Central area became like an expanded sector center where all the integration of all facilities will come to converge. So we started like that, and the concept on the development was that Abuja will be operated into like neighborhood centers. From the neighborhood center, you graduate into collections of neighborhood to form district, and then within districts, you have in phases. Phase 1 district has about 7 districts initially. We're talking about Wuse 1, Gariki 1, Wuse 2, Gariki 2, Maitama, Asokoro, and the central area itself. But later, of course, we have now added other districts like Gozapi and Maitama Extension District, which some people call Maitama Alero. That's for the purpose of identification, but it's actually Maitama Extension District. Then in phase 2, we have districts like Katampe, Mabushi, Jahi, Kado, down to until you get to around Gudu also. These are supposed to be developed in that manner, sequentially. Then, of course, where you have collections of districts, you have sectors, sector centers, which form by a group of about 3 to 4 districts. So that these sector centers are supposed to define heavy commercial locations where extensive facilities and tertiary level will be provided. At the district, you have secondary social amenities. At the neighborhood, you have primary. For example, if we take at the neighborhood center, you can have social facilities like nursery and primary schools, maybe outposts for police stations, health centers. These are the ones that you can have as a start at the social services facilities. Then when you graduate to a district, you can have a general hospital, you can have a secondary school, and then maybe on the other front of the, like security facilities for police, you can have a divisional police station there. Graduating to the sector centers, you have tertiary facilities. For the education, you have universities and all other colleges of higher colleges of education, polytechnics also. With respect to the health facilities, you can have referral hospitals and what have you, teaching hospitals also. This was the concept for the social facilities. As for the engineering infrastructure, which will actually develop, ensure the functionality of these districts and phases, so to say, as well as the sector centers. We have a structure in which there are primary, this one now came in reverse order, primary roads or primary engineering infrastructure, a collection of roads, water supply, power supply, stormwater drainages, and as well as foul or wastewater drainage facilities. We are talking about, in terms of the road, we are talking about having expressways and highways, and then in terms of water supply, each of these components of the engineering infrastructure, the Abuja Master Plan prepared the documentation such that each component has a master plan itself. So we have transportation master plan for roads network, we have water master plan, we have electricity master plan, we have drainage master plan.
This all sounds very comprehensive.
Yes.
At the start of it.
Yes.
But the big question arises, why all these steps strictly adhered to, given the prevailing circumstances, and at what point did subsequent administrations begin to set aside some of these laid down plans? And of course, there was a point in time that the authorities decided it was time to return to the master plan, which is suggestive of the fact that that had been abandoned at some point.
Well, thank you, Cyril. It may not be exactly as such. When the initial implementation of the Abuja master plan saw a situation in which when we moved into the commence development of the Abuja city and territory, we were developing on the basis of site and services, provide the facilities as well as some few social amenities that will allow for people to come and move in and then develop their properties. That was the concept, and if you recall, this area where we are, Garki area, 11 Garki area, 1 was zone 1, zone 6. These were some spots of areas where these were initially developed to allow for people to move in and start to operate. So all the districts were being developed on the basis of site and services. At that time, people did not appreciate really whether Abuja is going to be a reality. Okay. So the anxiety to move was not there. People were even given plots. They were not ready to come and take in Asokoro, in Maitama also. And these plots were actually developed and serviced. Just come and take it. People considered that this was like Abuja was a bush. Until in 1991, when the then military administration of General Ibrahim Babangida ordered that let's move into Abuja. And he came into Abuja. He was received at the that city gate that formed the entry into the city. At that time, that was about the level of the development in the city. When the seat of government has moved into Abuja, activities now begin to spring up. So people now begin to clamor for coming into the city. And since that time till now, the surge has become on ever increasing basis. So this is why you see very high influx of people into it, which is now coming to be an issue on overstretching what has been developed and what is yet to be developed. The funding of it is becoming a challenge. I think this is the balance I could say. Okay. Yes, there are distortions when we get to areas where we can lay claim on that or give issues on that. But really, this was the sequence. And some of the sequential pattern of development, which was planned to be operated on, actually lost up because people started clamoring for areas where it's outside areas that have been provided with this info. For example, when you talk of Kiami, island districts outside, people were asking for plots around there, preferential. So it became an issue. We have not done some areas and people are asking to be provided with plots in some areas to do some development. It became an issue. But I think we are on top of the situation.
Two things I'd like to concentrate on at this point, and it has to do with social amenities. Now, the influx, high population, water supply became a huge challenge. 3.1 million initially. Today, well, I'll not even want to hazard a guess for what the population of Abuja is. And that has led to water becoming scarce in some areas, which in turn has led people to begin to provide their own source of water. And now we understand that has also become a problem for the city administration with private boreholes everywhere. At some point in time, water vendors had taken over the streets, even in the central area. How do you propose dealing with all that?
Thank you very much, Siri. Yes, it's true. The population of this city has really grown so fast and very large. We are talking of now the city harboring of well over, if not over, at least close to 6 million. Not about the territory, we're talking about the city. Because everybody now wants to stay in the city or be part of the city. To this is added the challenges of having to bear with the installed facilities, which were meant for a lower population. Water supply is primary. Yes, because water means life. But we must give kudos to the present administration of President Buhari, who over the years, the city had operated on the planned water master plan. There was supposed to be 10 storage tanks, which will get treated water transported from lower Usuma Dam by gravity to this storage tank, which are located on high mountain ranges that form the crescent around the city. From where this will be distributed to the various spots. Each of those tanks were meant or targeted for a certain phase of the city. Now, because only phase one was substantially, phase one of the city was substantially, so to say, developed, because still the central area is still to be developed. Only the 2 tanks which were targeted to supply phase one have been in operation. The other tanks, there are 2 tanks for phase 2, 2 tanks for phase 3. Even though the tanks for phase 2 have been constructed, but they have not been charged to distribute water because the distribution loops are not in place. Phase 2, we are talking of all the districts of Jabi, Otako, Mabushi, Katampe, Gudu, those areas do remain also. And then phase 3, Warimpa, down until you get to Saraji, Wumba. This was supposed to have 2 tanks also. These tanks are currently under construction. So they are not even yet in place. So what happened? We are not even talking about the distribution loops then. That means all the water you see in all the phases 2 and 3 districts were water meant to supply phase 1. Temporary extensions were made. So it's understandable that at some location, people had to resort to the use of borehole, which rightly, as you have put, it created some problems. Some of the tremor we experienced in the city in the past is because of this proliferation of boreholes. So we had to put a check on that. And a case was really pressed for the need to provide these distribution loops and complete these tanks, which will be complete and charge these tanks, which will be supplying potable water to phases 2 and 3 and other phases. Not until the administration of President Buhari came on board, they now awarded the contract for greater Abuja water supply. Now that is what you see around now, these very large diameter tanks, providing the distribution loops around the phases 2 and 3 districts. Before, in the phase 1, there were only 9, let us say, including Gozape also, districts. Even with the temporary extensions to Jabi also, now there are about 33 districts of phase 2, which will be added with potable drinking water and other extensions to phases 4 north, as well as industrial area. All this will now be taken care of. So I think, rightly, there were challenges of water supply in the past, but this will come to pass. It's going to fizzle out as soon as this contract is completed and energized.
If we leave water, transportation is another huge challenge.
Yes.
One of the reasons so many people breathed a sigh of relief on leaving Lagos was the traffic situation. But at some point in time, it began to look as if Abuja was going down the path of Lagos. Initially, you could drive through the streets of Abuja and feel that you were indeed in new modern capital city. Now you hear people talk of hold-ups, traffic jams, and such terms have become associated with Abuja.
Well, I think you have made a case that to every development, especially where there are these population growth, there are bound to be challenges. In the word of one of our past ministers, Malan Nasir El-Rufai, he said he will not allow Abuja to be Lagosified. And I think this is a position which has been taken by the present FCT administration of Malam Muhammad Musa Bello too. Yes, when at some point in time, especially talking about the three entry gates into the city on the maybe Nyanya, Abuja Kefi Nyanya axis, Zuba Madalla axis from Suleja, and then of course from Gwagwalada through the airport. If we take the airport axis, for example, in the past, there were challenges that because of some uncompleted projects in all these three entry points, many of the projects were abandoned by the contractors then in the past because of challenges of huge unsettled liabilities also. And for this reason, many of the sites completely work on those projects were stalled. And for a very long period, especially along the airport road and Suleja axis, you see these hold-ups. And this was the character that is being exhibited as Abuja is going back to drain. So when the administration of Malam Muhammad Musa Bello came and given the mandate that they were given not to award fresh contracts, to see to the completion of ongoing projects that will have direct impact, he took for himself to see to the resolving and sorting out all issues on those projects that will have real direct impact. And transportation was one of his key consideration. He sorted and paid out all the liabilities for those contracts, got them to get back to site, and I think not only that we were able to complete those projects and open the roads. Before, if you were to travel, you can even miss your flight if you were to take the airport expressway. All these are now gone. I cannot say that everything of that is gone. There are some spots which on coming into around the city gate, for example.
So always a gridlock
yes,
at that point.
And maybe around the Koscharis, between Koscharis until you get to National Hospital, at times there are build-up there. These are areas where work is still ongoing, and we're trying to sort out this. There will be a time when you can move around the stadium in both directions, to and from the airport.
And then the notorious Nyaya, Kefi.
Maybe it's a good opportunity to explain this, Cyril. People will just, Abuja is Abuja, but there are certain aspects of the work which are shouldered to be handled by the FCT administration. And there are aspects which are actually under the purview of the Federal Ministry of Works. The obligation of the FCT on the road development in that axis is only up to Mogadishu Barrack, where you have that the flyover bridge by Mogadishu. After that, beyond there, the road until you get to Kefi is under the care of the Federal Ministry of Works. Yes, until you reach FCT boundary, we have a responsibility to see to it that operations within that axis should not be an issue. We are collaborating with the Federal Ministry of Works to see to it that we give some kind of support and intervention. And part of the intervention is that we have noted that to get to Karshi, Orozo, Jikoi, Karo, all our what do you call it, citizens, residents, FCT residents, must pass through the Abuja Nyanya Kefi Road. So what the FCT administration is doing now is to create an alternative to develop an alternative road. There is this Karshi-Apo road, which is to take off at Wasa Junction. Wasa is about 15 kilometers from there. Once that road is done, it will take away the traffic to that location.
Right. It's a good thing now that you speak about that Apo Karshi road.
Yes.
And that too is, there are people who live in the FCT who tell you they do anything but go on that road.
They will do something to go back onto that road by the grace of God. I think even though that the project is being handled by our satellite town development department, but just about 2 weeks ago, the minister was on that spot. He led the team of the Senate Committee on FCT as well as the House Committee on joint inspection. And the contractor there was even given a marching order to see to the delivery of that road, because it will substantially reduce travel time and the congestion that we are experiencing on the Nyanya-Kefi axis. So work is ongoing. Some of the traffic that you see within the town we've not addressed. The issue is because we are yet to develop the transportation facilities, which will allow for park and ride. Many of us, including myself and anybody, maybe my driver, will want to also use his vehicle to come to the city. In other great world-class cities, where the transportation facilities, rail and other urban mass transit facilities are in place, you don't need that.
Right.
Where there are park houses, you just go and take a ride, come and go to your place. We have not yet developed that, but we are making effort to see to that.
And that will be the next point we'll go to, particularly rail transportation within the city, just after this brief timeout with Engineer Shehu Hadi Ahmad, Executive Secretary of the FCD. Stay with us on One on One. We'll be back shortly.
Weekend File, your Saturday delight, going to places from the obscure to the hinterland and cities, bringing you development stories and perspectives, connecting the people with government and stakeholders on critical issues of our national life.
We are live in Abuja.
It's 9 p.m. every Saturday on the network service of the NTA. Weekend File, you can't afford to miss it.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said we are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One on One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network.
All right, we're still here with Engineer Shehu Hadi Ahmad, the Executive Secretary of the Federal Capital Development Authority. Just before we took that break, we were talking about transportation, and our attention was taken to transportation within the city center itself, and mass transit, for instance. And a key point here is rail transportation. People think about the Abuja monorail project and say, what happened? They recall that there were at best skeletal services linking the airport, but that seems to have stopped running for a while now, and other projects are still being awaited. Maybe we could get to know about it from you.
Actually, yes, you're talking about the Abuja light rail, in which at a point in time it was test run. There were movement from the metro station here in the central area to connect through Idu to connect with the airport. And I think it operated for some time. The project is being handled by another secretariat, the transportation secretariat, but at least we have this serious synergy because there's certain aspect which is part of the transportation infrastructure which we have to ensure that we develop in synergy. What happened that it has now gone like into clear. The issue is in the last 2 years or so, when COVID set in, because this was operated during pre-COVID period, it was test run. When COVID set in, of course, it had to be put off for some period to attend to the COVID. But in the FCT, along with other cities, especially in the northern part of the country, these issues of insurgency and insecurity came and took a hold on our operations. And so we could not get to resume the operation of these light rail facilities. And at that time when it was test run, the rolling stocks, actual rolling stocks that were required to even do the various operations have not yet been procured. Now they have been procured, they are in place. In the last 2 weeks that we went out with the Senate Committee on Ministry, the minister led them to inspect. They are in place. So when he ordered that, let them commence operation, we were confronted with the issue of, within the period of that insecurity also that was prevalent and witnessed in the FCT, there are some vandalism of some of the facilities along the rail tracks. And these are talking about from the city to the airport, as well as from Idu to Bazango. And there is a segment which has not yet been completed. So the Honorable Minister has ordered that this must be put in order. We gave a marching order to the Transportation Secretariat through their contractor, Mrs. CCECC. Incidentally, they are the people even developing the national rail. So they are working on it now, and we are hoping that in a very short while to come, operation will commence because the facilities are on ground.
Speaking of which, a lot of facilities, public facilities, have been vandalized in the FCT, which gives the impression that there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of securing public property.
Yes.
If the FCDA is designing, developing the federal capital, and these facilities are being vandalized, what can be done?
It's a challenge, but we have been working in collaboration with the Nigerian Security Civil Defense Corps to see to the assurance that they conduct routine surveillance to see to it that these facilities are not vandalized, because it's one of the mandate of the NSCDC, that is the protection of critical infrastructure. On our own, we have our internal surveillance mechanism, but you know, at times these bandits are very, very sophisticated. They come with sophisticated weapons. Even the civil defense are not armed. So in the last FCT, recent FCT security meetings, this has become an issue of concern, because the vandalism has gone to areas like this gully pots and manhole covers along the roads.
Yeah, we noticed that a lot of them have been taken off.
Yes, bridge railings and these cables for street lighting are being removed and stolen. And part of the initiative is, I'm sure that this is giving out yielding fruit, because first to trace the off-takers of these facilities. When you get them, we are very sure that we will get to the vandal. Whenever a vandal is caught now, we get them to lead to where are their off-takers. So both two are, of course, guilty of the crime of this vandalism. And I think the search is getting, we are replacing some of these covers with facilities that have no real second-hand value, especially the manhole and galley port covers. As for cables, it's a thing that you can't even understand. These are not free underground. They are encased in docks. Yet these vandals, dig out them. Late in the night they operate.
Which gives the impression that there must be amongst them knowledgeable, technical, competent people. And so it gives the impression that there could be collaboration with public officials too.
Well, we can't rule out, but where any of our officer is caught and found to be aiding and abating this kind of vandals in their activities, we take serious action on them. We cannot rule out that there can be this, because some of the things that we see around is very terrible. It is done today, replaced tomorrow, and by the next day, it is, when I say I'm not talking about as if it is serious like that. You replace something last week, and then another week it is removed. So, and this is at a cost. So our appeal to the resident is that they should take security as everybody's business. These facilities that are being installed is something that belongs to all the citizens. We should have the patriotism of giving this concern. When you see something that is having place, this thing that is coming from NOAA and the Federal Ministry of Information, when you see something, say something, I think it's a thing that we should enshrine. You should have the patriotism of having the feeling of not allowing a thing of the public to be vandalized. It's a rampant thing, but I think we are on top of the situation now in the FCT.
Now let's look at roads within the city itself. And sometimes you'd hear people say, well, these roads were constructed at the time they were constructed. They were adequate for the envisaged population and especially traffic in the capital city. That has changed over the years.
Yes.
And so in some areas you still find narrow roads which some say might be difficult to expand, and increased vehicular traffic, not forgetting the fact that some of them, initially there were allegations that things like bus stops were not taken into consideration in the design of the roads, but then even where you had them, those bus stops are not used by buses, and you find people driving on walkways, pavements. What should the FCDA do about all of this?
I think I've raised about 2 or 3 issues, Atiko. One is the hierarchy of the road development. Normally, for you coming into the city, you must come by way of one of the expressways. From there, the arrangement is for you to take the next hierarchy of the road, maybe a major arterial. It will now give you, this major arterial normally runs through various districts. So you have the takeoff from an expressway through a major arterial will now take you to other collectors, which will actually designate you to a particular district. There are districts with all these collector roads from where you feed in important local street down to the minor access road which provide access to properties, that is residences also. The local street can provide access to commercial and other facilities like that. Now, where you said some of these roads look narrow, maybe it's for the activity that should not be conducted along such roads, in which, assuming there are change of uses, which is not supposed to be so. For example, if you were specific to a particular district, I will tell you what are the challenges there. Maybe they are operating what they shouldn't operate around those locations. So apparently there can be noticed this heavy traffic flow. But where we follow the character, there shouldn't be a problem. Then talking about, sorry, because you raised two other issues.
Sure.
Yes, talking about provisions of, you said, bus stops and laybys. The Abuja Master Plan provided for the development of all these facilities alongside. You know, when we were talking, I said part of our challenges is that most of the transportation facilities have not been developed. And it is along, for example, one of the principal transportation route or corridor that is yet to be developed are the transit ways, in which we have the dual transportation mode of having transit, bus transit lane, dedicated bus lane, in the center which is sandwiched these light trams, tram lines where you see it all over the cities. Where we have that, that is principally one of the facilities that will ensure mass transit of facilities, freight and cargoes. Then the Abuja Transportation Center, where you have the conversion of these buses, taxis, as well as the train services to come and converge. They all have not been developed. Yes, there are locations where we are now improvising on some of our highways to have the laybys and then drop a bus stop and with pedestrian crossing bridges. If the facilities along these transit ways have been developed, most of the transport, in fact, this is an aberration to even have pedestrian crossing expressways. It's not done elsewhere. We are just doing that because it's like a stopgap arrangement. When we have what we should have along our transportation facility, we may not need that. So where you see in some location, for example, if we take Nnamdi Azikiwe Way, it's an urban expressway. Around maybe Julius Berger, there had been a lay-by provided. Now I'm going to explain this to tell you the attitude of our average Nigerian road user. Because you made the issue of people driving on walkways. He will even honk the pedestrian, expecting that the pedestrian should clear the way. That is a dedicated facility for the pedestrian, and which should have been allowed for that. You find some of our security or traffic officers parking even on the pedestrian walkway, signaling, road users to use other way. This is where you find around banks, they block this and say no parking. There is a parking lane provided there. We have, this is coming from what we regard as our attitude. Right. Nigerian, typical of attitude of Nigerian in the use of government facilities.
Speaking of which, in your answer to part of that question, you talked about change in use. And we see that all over the place. There are certain areas that have suddenly become commercial hubs. Yes. And it would seem those places were not originally meant for. Clubs have sprung up on the roads, shopping malls in the middle of residential areas. A typical example with clubs is Wuse 2. Virtually every street on Wuse 2 has a club. And every evening the highways are blocked. Whose responsibility is that?
Yeah, these are some of the aberrations that have been noticed over the years, of course arising from the non-availability of the facilities where they should. If we were to have the Abuja Central area fully developed, the central area is like a larger sector center, which I said, which should allow for the operation of facilities on 24/7 basis. Our districts should be retiring homes, places where you go to residences. But you and I know that the development of these facilities in those areas where you call like Wusetu, along Ademola, Tokumbo, and maybe around Namino Kano, Crescent, they came well ahead of the areas where such activities should have been operated on. So, not that it is a tolerable distortion, it's not. And there is a deliberate effort by the FCT administration to address such issues, because it's an aberration. We cannot allow that. And I want to tell you that there are currently ongoing exercise by the Department of Development Control of the Abuja Metropolitan Management Council to clear some of this. But before we do that, we are looking at what other alternatives you will provide for such facilities. That is just the truth.
Well, as we prepare to wind down, that's the big one, which has to do with the funding for the huge projects which must be undertaken in the development of Nigeria's federal capital to the standard that was mentioned in its mandate of new capital cities around the world. In fact, there was a portion of it that said to build to that standard and even surpass the standards we've seen in other cities of the world.
Yes.
How much of this has been affected by funding, and how are we going about it?
A lot of it is being affected really by funding because development of engineering infrastructure is heavy capital intensive, and that is all over. In fact, you hear budgets of the largest economies in the world, US, UK, talking about their infrastructure deficit in the tune of billions. US is talking about trillions of dollars. Even talking in Naira here, if we talk in trillion, we are still somewhere to say that yes, there are challenges. For the FCT, the Abuja project is actually supposed to be a federal government project. Federal government in the sense that Abuja is the creation of the federal government, as you rightly captured. So the funding of the Abuja city and territory should have solely been taken up by the federal government. I give a semblance of such cities that were developed and operated by their respective governments. Brasilia in Brazil, for example, Canberra in Australia also. A time was set, and within the period, they made sure that they developed principally all the... incidentally, we have fallen short of getting the necessary funding from the federal government. If I tell you that in the recent budget of the national budget, or the provision for FCTA is nothing to write home about. But on the other hand, the FCTA is supposed to, by the designation and provision in the Nigerian constitution, also supposed to operate as if it were a state. So we also operate a statutory budget typical of a state through the various internally generated revenue subject to its being appropriated by the National Assembly, which is the legislative arm of the FCT. Now, these revenues are not really very, very forthcoming, but we are there's significant improvement because the present administration of Malam Musa Bello got to resolve all issues regarding the operation of the FCT Internal Revenue Service, and they are really working with a target. For the first time, FCT is presenting a budget of about 600 billion, never in the past before. We were talking in the tune of 2 to 250 billion. Now, there is this real hope that we are going to get an enhancement in our revenue generation. So, a lot will come to the FCT. Then, too, the Malam Muhammad Musa Bello also made an effort to reach out to Sukuk funding. Sukuk funding for the first time. Over the years, no attempt has been made by any other administration, but he has now keyed into Sukuk funding. And some of our infrastructure development, especially the Sukuk, which has come up now, is for the development of roads and bridges. We are making other effort to reach out to Sukuk to consider other options of critical infrastructure, and we're hoping that we will get through with them, through the DMO. So I think there is an improvement, significant improvement in the funding profile, but it has not been an easy thing because normally it's when you get to do, and it has not also been helped by the changes in the market conditions that we have noticed over the period. The Naira is anything but, you know, when you think of the currency fluctuation that has afflicted our local currency, it's nothing to write home. Almost all the projects are undergoing reviews because, and it's obvious, prices of construction materials have really skyrocketed. So we are a consumer nation. We are not really productive. So there are so many things that we rely on to get in the market. So it's not an easy thing, but I think there's a deliberate attempt to change the narrative in the FCT.
Well, overall in all of this, not many people understand the administration of Nigeria's federal capital territory. There's a lot of confusion. Here is a territory created by law, the federal government. It is administered by the National Assembly. It has a minister, yet it has elected local council chairman. There's also the FCDA. And so many a times we hear the question, who is in charge in Abuja? Where is the position of the FCDA and how do you relate to all these bodies?
Thank you very much, Siri. I didn't know you were going to ask me this. Otherwise, I would have come prepared with that. However, to start with, FCTA, like I've just said, FCT is the creation of the federal government, and the law in the Constitution provides that it should operate as if it were a state. So on one hand, the federal government under the watch of the Governor General, in this case, Mr. President, who has delegated this responsibility through a minister to come and oversee that. Relating the minister with FCDA particularly, where I'm most concerned, is that the minister, by the provision of the same law, FCT Act, is supposed to superintend over the Federal Capital Development Authority Board as its chairman. Our relationship with the FCT administration, FCDA, is that I report to my chairman of the board. And he oversees the other activities, ministerial or administrative activities, through the permanent secretary. As it were, under the arrangement of ministries, all MDAs are supposed to have a minister, there should be a permanent secretary. So they operate in that circumstance. We do have synergy and collaboration because there are certain things that they need the intervention of the Federal Capital Development Authority to provide. As the Executive Secretary, I operate as the Secretary of the board. The board is normally appointed by the President. So you can understand in the line of FCDA, there is a minister has his office now, superintending over the Ministry of, the Federal Capital Territory Administration as minister. When there is a board meeting and he has to deal with, in this FCDA block, directly opposite UNTA here, we have an FCDA boardroom. The minister comes here to superintend over the FCDA board meeting. So this one is not an issue. But of course, there are some challenges here and there, which we, Malam Muhammad Musa Bello also tried to, and I think there is no one minister that has given this more push than he has. He used to leave his office to come. I understand before, with previous ministers, the FCDA board will still go and meet the minister. So he has made that clearly distinct. When there are issues of FCDA, he refers to the FCDA as the chairman of the board. And this is what obtains. Now talking about area councils, I think that is also the creation in the law, in which if there were to be a state, then a state should have local governments. In Abuja, we have area council. So that's why they go through the process. Maybe there is one thing that is silently in agitation for Abuja to have a mayoralty status. Maybe this is what's time to come.
I raised the question because I'm imagining, for instance, that your mandate is to design, develop the federal capital. And you are situated between the Abuja Municipal Area Council. And so one would think, what is the FCDA's relationship with AMAC? And how does it relate with AMAC and the ministry? And how do you go develop a portion that is, yeah, but from your explanation, it would seem that
there is in the ministry created by the then RFI, National RFI administration, where he sought and got the approval to collapse the ministry structure.
Okay.
He now established Federal Capital Territory Administration.
All right.
In the words of RFI, in his structure, he doesn't need the ministry character. So he doesn't even need a permanent secretary. He created instead mandate secretariats.
Okay.
So that if the administration were to operate as if it were a state, those mandate secretaries were like state ministers to be headed by commissioners.
Okay.
And that is what is still prevailing today. So there is in the FCT administration an area council service secretariat, which is supposed to coordinate the activities of the area councils. The FCTA has an ESCO, executive committee meeting periodically, with the mandate secretaries as members of the ESCOs, as commissioners, state commissioners. So it's like the state executive council.
Okay.
So there are, I cannot say that there are no problems, but there are not issues that are not being surmounted. Okay. Yes.
All right. Engineer Shehu Ahmad, a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, Executive Secretary, Federal Capital Development Authority, FCD. It's been interesting talking to you. There's so many things about developing Abuja that we still have not touched on. We're hoping that we will have a second a second sit down on this matter, and we hope you'll oblige us when we do come.
The pleasure will be mine. Honestly, it's interesting.
Thank you very much for coming.
Talking with you, Cyril. I have been in the past a keen watcher of all your programs. Now, at least having to interfere, and I mean interferes with you on this, I think it's a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I am Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.